All right. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Where should we start? Okay, so let's start with the STLC and so we were learning about STLC. We finished requirement phase, we finished test plan phase. Now we're moving into test cases phase. So test cases is the one really, this is the most important one basically. This is what you will be doing daily basis. You may or may not create test plan in your project, but you will be creating test cases every day, each and every day. Either you're creating it or executing it. So phase number 1 and 3, this is what you will be spending a lot of time on. So this is the requirement, right? You will have requirements and you'll understand the requirement, and then you'll be breaking down those requirements into test cases form. So these two are really important. You will not create requirements. Requirements will be created by business analyst or another team, but you'll be creating test cases out of the requirement. So that's why it's very important for us to understand what is requirement and how to, what is test cases and how to create those test cases and what to do with that. Radwan, you have your hand raised, brother.
Yes, brother. Is anybody doing meeting minutes today?
Are there any volunteers? Okay. Radwan, I'll let you handle it in the background. See if there are any volunteers. If anyone wants to do it, or select someone, ping them, and hopefully they can take care of that.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. So let's talk about test cases. How do we create test cases? What are the test cases and what to do with those? Okay. Anyone has any idea about test cases? What are those and how to create those? Where do we create those test cases from? You guys remember we had this requirement, right, for this dummy application, Guru 99 demo application. We had some requirement out of this. So a requirement could be as simple as, can I navigate to this application? That could be a requirement. Does this homepage display, can we navigate to this homepage? This could be a requirement. These are high-level requirements, and when it comes to more detailed requirements, that could be something like the functionality of username and password, the functionality of registering, right? If you go to register functionality, there is so much to talk about, right? In terms of requirement, how does this field should look like? This page should look like, and input box. What are the different characters that this input box could support? What are the limitation and whatnot? So each and everything is requirement, detailed level requirement. When it comes to mandatory fields on this page, what are the mandatory fields? These are requirements. And I hope by now all of you understand and have some clear idea about requirements. Any questions before we move on to talk about test cases? It's important you understand about requirement before we move on to test cases. All right. Feel free to ask any questions at any point. Now, moving on to, let's create some requirement first, and then we'll create test cases out of those requirements. Simple test case.
See, the good thing is they record everything they're doing now, so I can watch it again.
Okay. All right, so Let's create some test cases, Google Docs. So let's scroll down and create some requirements here. So we could create, let's say, requirement ID 001. What should be our requirement? Where is this page? Okay. So let's say first requirement, can we navigate to sign on page? This is our home page. So this is our home page. So let's say we could create this requirement. I could just go here, copy this. Okay, so this could be our one of our requirement, right? Requirement ID is 001, RQ001. And first requirement could be, as a user, I should be able to navigate to the home page of that application. And what is that application? Guru99.com, right? Demo.guru99.com. Okay. Right, so this is our requirement 001. And for that, we can say supported browser. So for this application, let's say we are supporting Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. These three are our supported browsers. Application should support these three browsers. All right, so that's one requirement. Let's create another requirement, and then we'll create test cases out of those requirements. So what should be another one? All right, so requirement 002 is also very simple. Same application. Can we navigate to the flight page? 001, 002, two requirements. Any questions on the requirement? As a user, I should be able to navigate to the flight page of the application. The URL is there. Supported browsers are Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. These are the supported browsers. Great. So now that we have the requirements in place, let's go ahead and create test cases. Now, what is test cases? Test cases are step-by-step process to test a requirement. So these are the requirement. We need to test this requirement. So before we test those requirements, we need to create test cases. First, we need to understand this requirement and see like how can we attack this requirement? How can we break it? How can we find issues out of this requirement by our testing? So now by looking at it, we need to start creating our scenarios and then test cases. So scenarios, if I look at this, this is very, very simple test requirement. I don't have so many scenarios for this one. If we have a register page, if we're working on the register page, if we're working on the login functionality, we could create n number of scenarios and test cases. There's so many fields here. For each one of them, we could create a test case, or we could combine some of them. We could create positive scenarios, we could create negative scenarios. So what would be your positive scenarios? What would be your negative scenarios? We need to understand those. But when it comes to just navigating to an application, you probably don't have so many scenarios. So let's create those scenarios and we'll talk about other things, right? Let me open an Excel sheet.
Got it right. First, based on the requirement, then we make the test scenarios, then we start writing test cases. Just the step by step. Just
Sorry, can you repeat that?
yeah. First, based on the requirement, we write first scenario, test scenario, then we convert it to test cases, test scenario.
Yeah, so based on the requirement, first you need to understand the requirement, and then you need to understand like how do you create how many scenarios can you come up with of that requirement, and then from there you start basically. So by looking at this, right, you know, if you look at this one, this requirements, right? So requirement ID. So this would be a requirement ID, right? So let's just copy it here. So let's create some headers. Requirement ID. This is your requirement ID, right? And then if we go here, this is your requirement, right? So now we are creating test cases, right? We are using this sheet to create test cases. So this would be your requirement description, right? This is your requirement description, right? Now, what else? Let's create other headers, right? Test case ID, right? Then you could create description. What else? All right, so let's start with this. I do not use Google Sheet often, so bear with me. Okay. So test case ID. So let's say your test case ID, let's say TC test stands for test case 001. So that's your test case ID. Now test case description. Test case description is nothing but scenario. Now you want to draw your scenarios. From here, as a user, you're saying, as a user, I should be able to navigate to the home page of this application, and these are your supported browsers. So now you should say you want to verify that you should be able to navigate to that application using one of those browser, right? So now you're drawing your scenarios. So how many scenarios can you come up with from this requirement? The way I see it, it should be 3, and that should be good enough to test this requirement, just this requirement. So from here, I'm going to start writing my test scenarios, and then I'll break it down into test cases. So I'll verify user is able to navigate to the, I can just copy this, navigate to the home page of this application using Chrome. So you cannot test all 3 at once, right? So you need to test one thing at a time, right? So here you can only test, these are your each steps, right? So you cannot test all 3 browsers at once. So you are just saying, I want to verify I'm able to log into this application, not log in, navigate to this application using Chrome browser. So this is your first scenario, right? And now from here, you're going to start drawing other scenarios, right? So let me just copy these headers if you don't mind. So you'll have this type of headers, right? When it comes to test cases, your header should be first four, I hope you understand, right? And then the fifth one would be steps, then expected results, actual results, statuses, the data created by. If you're creating your test cases on the Excel sheet, these are your headers. If you're creating test cases in any other tools, it will have similar type of headers. For example, if you're using Jira will have Jira X-ray, and X-ray will have their own sets of headers. And if you understand these, you will understand all of them. If you're using, there is another tool called ALM, QCLM, QC or LM, or HP tool, pretty old, no one uses in the market right now, but chances are probably 5% of the companies are using it. So if you get hired by that, so they will have this type of headers. If you understand this, you should understand all of them. When you and I will go into the project, we'll be using X-ray, and I'll show you today how we create test cases in X-ray for my real project. All right, so now you have your requirement. So I hope you understand your requirement. Requirement has a requirement ID, requirement description. Then we have test cases, test case ID. Then we have test case description, which is a scenario we just have drawn, right? Now, for this scenario, what are the steps? This is what you're writing here. So step one would be what? Navigate to that. What is your step one? Open Chrome, right? That is what you are testing, right? That's your step one. Open Chrome. Right. Step two would be, this is your step two would be enter the URL, right? Enter the URL. As this is just step-by-step process, so you really have to be very detailed when it comes to this, even though sometimes it may feel like it's a silly step, but you have to record it. Anyone should be able to understand what action you perform. You need to record all of your action here. So after entering the URL, you would be hitting enter, right? So you should say it enter. Once you do that, what happens? That's your, once you hit the enter button on the keyboard, right? Once you hit that, what happens? The home page displays. You should be able to verify that you are on the home page. So that's your requirement. Your requirement says verify user is able to navigate to the home page of this application using Chrome. So your fourth step should be, it's really simple, guys. Verify. Your fourth step should be just to copy this. Verify user is able to navigate to the home page of that application successfully. That's your home page. Sorry, that's your steps, basically. That's pretty much your steps. These are your steps. Step one, open the Chrome browser. Step two, enter the URL. 3, hit enter. 4, verify you're on the home page. Your expected result. Okay, so when it comes to test case creation, right, this is where you stop. You could create your expected result. Expected result should be user shall be able to, it's not working. User shall be able to do the home page So that's your, this is what you're expecting out of these steps. So just notice here, right? When you're writing your description, you should use this type of language, like verify user is able to, right? When you're writing steps, when you're on your last step, you should be able to use the same or the similar text in here. And expected result, you should be saying something like user shall be able to. And in your actual result, you can write, when we get there, we are not, today we will not talk about actual result. You're just verifying expected versus actual is matching or not. That's what you're verifying. Status will be pass or fail. Date would be execution date whenever you execute. Created by is obviously your name. So these are the steps you won't create right now. This is when you do your execution, when you execute your tests. Right now, we're just designing our tests. So we will be just doing until expected result. Any questions, guys? All right. To validate this requirement.
Yes, right. Sorry, question.
Yeah.
So I know how on the steps you said, so basically you're explaining with the Chrome browser. So do we have to do another step for Edge and Firefox also? Or you
Yes,
just,
absolutely. No, we have to create 2 more test cases for this.
okay, got it.
Yeah. So we could simply just create 2 more test cases here. Could simply copy this and paste it and just change the, okay, so this should be 002 and this one should be 003. All right. So here let's say you're just changing from Chrome to Edge. That's your second scenario. Here you're changing Chrome to Edge. That's your second scenario. Your third, you're just copying this because this is very simple, right? Your test scenarios. From here, you're just changing Edge to Firefox. Same here. That's it. For this requirement, this is enough. We should be 3 test cases and we're good to go. I don't see any other scenarios for this unless if you guys do. I think 3 scenarios and we're good to go. Any
Question?
Yeah.
Yes. So I understand for this requirement because we're coming up with 3 scenarios because of Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. But like, and so in general, how do you come up with? How would you come out with the number of scenarios? Like for this requirement, I'm gonna need this many scenarios, or so on.
Yeah. This is a very, very good question. Based on the requirement, when you're reading through the requirement, let's read through another requirement and we can understand better. So this one is also very, very similar, right? If we are writing test cases for this one, maybe we'll do it together in a second, but let's just go through another requirement and then we'll practice it also, right? So if this is what we practice, right? A sign-on page, then this is also very sign-on page. Okay, so let's not worry, spend time here. So let's look at this one. Requirement 002. Sign-on page shall have below text displaying right below sign-on header. We'll come back to blah, blah, blah. Okay. This is also very, very simple. So I don't think we have so many scenarios for that. But so let's look at this one, username field. So requirement 003, username field and password. Username input box shall exist with user having ability to enter free text. Password field. Password input box shall exist with user having ability to enter free text. So requirement 003, right? So if we read through this, let's continue on this requirement. So we're talking about this input box. Users shall be able to verify that we have an input box of username. Another one is for password. And then from here, right, I think you have 3-4 scenarios, right? First of all, verify that this field exists, verify that this field exists, then verify user has the ability to enter free text. Same thing here, right? So 4 scenarios here already. And then let's go talk about more requirements for this same thing. Now, take a look at this. Username requirement must be unique. So when they're saying like username must be unique, how would you make sure that username is unique? Can anyone explain or talk about it a little bit?
It has to be different from all other usernames in the database. For example, if there is like Kadir1, the next one would have to be Kadir1 too. The same Kadir1 wouldn't be enrolled as a username because there are already one person who has been entitled with that title.
Correct. So how would you verify? How would you verify it with your test cases? How would you write your test cases?
How would we write our test cases with username for the username?
So for this bullet point, how would you write your test cases?
You can try making a second username same as the first one to see if it goes through.
Right. So here you have your negative and positive scenarios here. So before we talk a little bit about negative and positive, right? So your positive would be unique and your negative is duplicate. So you should be creating a test case saying, okay, ABC123, that's my first test case, and application shall accept this username. The next is a negative scenario. Create another username with ABC123, and user shall not be admitted to the application, or the password or the username shall not be accepted. So that's your negative scenario. So that's another scenario for this requirement, right? Now, next line here, it's talking about username must be 8 to 10 digit. Okay, must be at least 8 characters, but not more than 10. So how many scenarios can you come up with from this line only? Any
It should
guesses?
be 6 scenarios.
Can you tell me a little bit about what are the scenarios?
First, we will check with the 7 character, then
Okay.
8 character, 9 character, 10 character, then 11 character.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. Absolutely right. So now, so must be 8 to. So let's say, I know realistically this won't happen, but let's just say username must be at least 8 characters, but not more than 100. How would you test that? Now we're saying you have a username field from 8 to 100. This is what your application should support. I know it won't happen for this field in your application, but this may happen for other part of the application or other scenarios, not necessarily for username and password, but for other scenarios. You could have input box supporting this many numbers, this many characters. How would you test this? Would you write 100 scenarios, or how would you test it?
Kadir bhai,
Shouldn't it be only 3, like one of the username with less than 8 character, and one username with any number between 8 and 100, and one would be more than 100?
How would you verify that your application is not breaking when you enter? So let's say you select a number between 8 and 100. Let's say you selected number 50, but how would you know when you enter 99 or 90 or 70 application will not fail? How would you think having 3 scenarios or 5 scenarios, it would satisfy this requirement? Because this is a big thing, right? Once you have an application in place, there is so many people will be using it, and there's so many ways application can break and will break. As a tester, how would you make sure that you are satisfied and you think you've done enough to test this scenario?
So
So-
can we write it has to be equal to 8, not less than 8, and no less than 100, or less than or equal to 100?
Not good enough. I'm trying to
So
have,
in this case, for my understand, like when we see like that kind of number in the requirement, we follow a technique which is called boundary value analysis. So we try with the minimum number and maximum number. So we try first minimum -1, minimum, then minimum +1, and whichever the maximum number, we try first maximum -1, then maximum +1.
so
We follow this technique.
this technique is good if you have something like this. The technique you talked about, if you have something like this, you know, something around 6 to 10 or 8 to 10 or 6 to 12 or 8 to 12, if those numbers were close enough, then it's good. But when it comes to bigger number, you want to be able to test more scenarios, and you need to have like more checks and balances in place. So there is a technique called equivalent partition in testing world. I don't know if you guys heard of it. So what it means is you want to divide this into different partitions, assuming those will behave as same. So 1 to 100, right? Ideally, you should be testing each and every scenarios, but this is silly and this is not possible. If those numbers are at hundreds or thousands, how would you test it? And it happens, and depending on what type of application you have, there will be either input box or something else that requires you to test similar scenarios over and over again. And when it happens, you need to use this technique called equivalent partitioning, meaning you will divide this into, let's say, since this is 100, I will divide it into 10, right? So assuming each part will behave the same or similar manner. So my test case would be something. So here we have like, you know, negative supported number from 6 to 10, 6 to 100, right? So I will divide it into like 8, 9, or 10 part, and then pick a test case from each parts, assuming those are behaving same way, and then write test cases for each partition, right? First scenarios will be obviously less than 6, and then one test case would be 6, right? On the 6, and then one test case would be 100, and then obviously one scenario would be 100 plus. But whatever is within, right, from 6 to or 7 to 100, I will be dividing it and select one test case from each partition, and then I will be satisfied, and I will have it recorded. So, you know, if anyone from the company asks me how did I test this, I have this recorded in place. When I say recorded, I'm talking about documentation, nothing more than that. Does this make sense? Just research a little bit about equivalent partition. You'll understand better. So
One more question, guys. So
yeah.
when we have a small number like 6 to 10 or 6 to 20 something, then we follow boundary value. And when we have a bigger number, then we follow equivalence partition, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Because it doesn't make sense to create 100 test cases which is similar. And this is the equivalent partitioning. This just not only it applies here, whenever you have similar scenarios or similar repetitive scenarios that you need to test, that's when you can apply those. There might be, if you're working in banking platform, you might see this kind of repeated scenarios that you need to test, and you need to be able to find a way to execute less number of test cases and not have repeated scenarios and satisfy that requirement. You look into it, you know, in your interview, they might ask you this type of questions. All right, so this is your second bullet point. Third one, you can use letters, numbers, period, and the @ symbols. So here you could write multiple scenarios, you know, you can use. So this is for the requirement username. They're saying you can use letters only, numbers only, or the special characters only. So here you will be creating at least 8-9 scenarios, one with just letters, one with just numbers, one with just special characters, and then you will be mixing them. You'll be mixing those in letters and numbers, and letters and special characters, then numbers and special characters and whatnot. Usernames are not case sensitive, so you'll be creating at least 2-3 scenarios here, at least 2. If any of the above criteria does not match, then the application must display an error message, and user shall not be able to log in. Couple of scenarios here as well. So that's how you break down your requirement, and that's how you write your test scenarios and test cases. By reading through it, understanding it, asking questions, asking right questions, and then you create your test cases. Now, going into password field, you were saying password field must be 6 to 8 characters. So obviously you'll be your first test case should be not entering anything in the password field, leaving it empty, see how application reacts. When you are a good tester, you want to break that application. You need to be very, very creative. You need to think outside the box. You need to be better than average tester. So do not limit your test cases. Do not write down your test cases, but also do more than those. When it comes to execution, play around. You know, you may not write, okay, I'll have a test case here where I'm just going to enter 0 and then start. Hit the login button and see how it reacts. You may or may not write this scenario here, but you should execute. You should try to see how application behaves. Trust me, you may think application is fine, but it's not. You could do some weird thing and it will break. Now, again, you want to be different from others. You should think as a tester, you should think as a hacker, you should think as a developer, you should think as a customer. Everything you need to consider, right? Okay. So obviously you'll be doing one empty field, one with less than 6, one is 6, one is between 6 and 8, then 1 8, and maybe 1 8 plus. Maybe one of them you should try with 100 characters and see how application behaves, just for fun. Okay. Must contains at least one letter, one number, one special character. So here, unlike username field, here you're saying username password must have a letter and a number and a special character. Sorry, is there a question? Is there a question, brother? Okay, so moving on. So here you're saying, so okay, so second bullet point, I think you could create at least 1, 6, 7, 8 scenarios. You have 3, you could create some positive scenarios, but a lot of negative scenarios. Right here, the password field must contains this. So obviously you'll create password without this, or without one of this, or without two of these, to see how application behaves. Application shall not accept those passwords if you are not meeting this requirement. So you will have many scenarios here. Bullet point 3, not contain spaces. So that's something you need to have negative and positive scenarios. Next one is case sensitive. So here you'll have multiple scenarios as well. Do not make password same as the username. One scenario here should be fine. Field shall only have encrypted values. So that's another thing you need to verify, that your password is encrypted. And here, if none of the above criteria matches, an application shall display an error message. So you're verifying the error message here. So this requirement has so many scenarios, I cannot count, but we went over it, and I would request you guys to create test cases for these three requirements. We've been working on these 3 requirements. Very simple. First one is we already completed. I'll share this template with you guys so you have it for your record. You already have created, we created this together, right? And I'm not even talking about which browsers we're supporting here. I don't want to give you guys more work, but all I'm saying, just verify these 3 requirements just on any browser. Just specify which browser you're working on, preferably Chrome, so use Chrome if you have, but create test cases for these 3 requirement. Again, first one we have completed, second and third you need to complete. Are we okay with that? Are we okay with this? Any questions? So this test cases practice, it's so important, I cannot explain to you. If you do not understand how to write test cases, if you do not know how to write test cases, you're not a tester. It's that simple. So you need to understand. First, you need to understand what is test cases, how to create those test cases, and what to do with this. How do you break down those requirements and then create scenarios and then create test cases? Okay. Questions, concerns, suggestions?
But I
Can
did
we-
something to say.
Yeah.
So there are many people that aren't doing the homework, and this test case is something very serious for testers. So, like, can you please request everyone to be very serious on this?
I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all I just wanted to say though.
Okay, is Rajubai here?
Kadir bhai, can we just see the template you created on Google Sheets real quick?
This one?
Yeah.
I'll give it, yeah, go ahead. I'll give it to you guys. So you have it, you can use the same template.
You want us to create test cases until the expected result, right? Not to verify like the actual result and status.
Yeah, just create until expected result. This is where you stop when it comes to designing test cases. After that, we'll move on to test case execution. Let me just show you. Let me show you. Okay, so you see, create test cases. This, when it comes to creating test cases, you only design it until expected result, and here you have execute the system tests. It's nothing but executing test cases. This is where you start working from actual results. So I'm gonna stop recording, but we'll continue to talk about test cases.